I have carried the keys to every door in this fortress for 6 years, which means I know 2 things better than anyone alive: where every lock is, and how little it matters to hold a key when no one will open their ears. I am Tilda. I was 24 that spring, a woman grown by any law you like, and a maid by every law that counted in the king's hall, which is to say I was furniture that walked. I lit the lamps and snuffed them. I aired the rooms no one used. I carried the great ring of iron keys at my hip, and it sang when I walked, and not one person in that fortress had ever once turned at the sound of it to see who was coming. That is the gift of being a maid. You are everywhere, and you are no one, and you hear everything. I heard the plot on a Tuesday, snuffing the lamps in the East Passage. I want to be honest about my choices here, because someone always asks. A maid survives by being unseen. The safe thing the thing 6 years had taught me in my bones was to finish the lamps, go to bed, and let the powerful murder one another the way the powerful do. No one would ever have known I heard. I chose otherwise. I want that on the record. Whatever happened after, it happened because I decided a king's life was worth more than my own comfortable invisibility, and I have never once regretted the decision, only the 7 times I had to make it. 7, I counted. The first time, I told the captain of the night watch, a decent man named Gunnar, with a beard like a thorn bush and no patience for maids. He heard me out, I will give him that, and then he asked me, not unkindly, whether I had been at the cooking wine. The lamps make the passages warm, he said. Sound carries strangely. Go to bed, girl. The second time, I told the steward of the kitchens, who told me to mind my pots. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th times blur together. Because they were the same. A closed door, a busy man, a maid with keys at her hip, and a warning in her mouth, and the small specific humiliation of being thanked for my concern. I have been thanked for my concern more times than I have been paid, and it costs the thanker exactly nothing, which is how you can tell it for what it is. The 6th time I told Lord Roderick, the master of the king's household, because I had run out of lesser men to disbelieve me. Roderick was the calm at the centre of the fortress, the king's own sworn shield since they were boys, keeper of the household, the man who knew where everything was, and who everyone trusted to know it. He had a way of listening that made you feel heard, right up until the moment you realised you had been managed. He listened to my whole account, the 2 voices in the East Passage, the word poison, the word feast, the name I had put to one of them, and then he folded his hands and told me, gently, that he would look into it personally. He did look into it. That was the trouble. I just did not understand yet what looking into it meant, when the man doing the looking was the man you should have been looking at. The 7th time, I told the king, I had no business near him. A maid does not approach the wolf throne. But the wolf made my business for me, and that is where this story actually turns, so let me back up and tell it properly. The king's wolf had been behaving strangely around me for a month before any of this, and I had told no one. Because who would I tell? And what would I say the king's wolf keeps bringing me things? Because it did. It started with a glove. I found one of the king's hunting gloves on my pallet in the maid's quarters, fine grey leather, unmistakably his, and I nearly fainted. Because a maid found with the king's belongings is a maid who hangs. I returned it to the kennels in a panic. 3 days later, the wolf brought it back. To me, it walked the length of the lower corridor with the king's glove in its mouth, past warriors who froze against the walls, and laid it at my feet in the scullery, as though completing a transaction we had agreed upon. Then it was a boot. Then, God help me, it was the king's own seal ring, which I wrapped in a rag and delivered to Gunnar with my heart in my throat, swearing I had not stolen it. And Gunnar looked from the ring to me to the wolf, sitting in the doorway, with its tongue out and its tail sweeping the floor, and he said a word I will not repeat in front of an audience. The king, I would learn, found this development unbearable. Magnus of the Iron Reach did not lose control of anything, least of all his own wolf, and his own wolf was conducting a one-animal courtship of a scullery maid in front of his entire court. He was, by every account, mortified. He was also, and this is the part the court could not forgive, entirely unable to stop it. So when I came to the great hall, on the 7th day, with my warning, the wolf was already there. And the wolf was already mine, and that changed what a maid was allowed to do. I will tell you what the king looked like the first time he truly looked at me, but not yet. The first time he looked at me, he did not see me at all. He saw a maid making a scene, and his face closed like a door I did not have the key to. "My king," I said, and the hall went quiet the way a hall does when something improper is happening. "There is a plot against your life. At the feast. I have heard it spoken, twice, and I have told 6 men, and I am telling you because the 6 men did not listen, and I have run out of men." A laugh went around the hall. Not cruel, exactly. Worse than cruel. Indulgent, Roderick rose from the king's right hand, smooth as oil on water. "My king, I have looked into the maid's claim myself. It is a misheard conversation in a warm passage. The household is secure. I would stake my life on it." He smiled at me, and it was a kind smile, and that was the most frightening thing about it. I understand the girl means well. The king looked at Roderick, his oldest friend, his sworn shield, the calm at the centre, and he looked at me. A maid with shaking keys and no rank, and a wolf inexplicably planted at her side. And there was no contest. There was never going to be a contest. I had known that before I opened my mouth, and I had opened it anyway. "The household is secure," the king said. "To the room. Not to me. There will be no..." And his wolf, sitting at my hip, threw back its head and made a sound that was not agreement. That was the 7th time, and it was the last time I asked, because asking had taken me as far as asking goes. The wolf gave me one more chance at him before they did, and the wolf did not ask my permission. I was carrying linen along the upper gallery, keys when it came around the corner at a dead trot, took the hem of my sleeve in its teeth, and towed me linen and all through a door that should have been the king's private study, and was, because the king was in it. Magnus looked up from a map of his own border, with the expression of a man whose dignity has just been handed to a maid by a wolf. For a moment, neither of us. The wolf sat down between us, pleased with itself, and refused to move. "I did not send for you," he said. "No, my lord." He did. I gathered the linen against me, and did not curtsy, because my hands were full, and because I had run out of the part of me that curtsied. "I'll go." "Stay." It was not a kindness. It was a command, and it cost him to give it. I watched it cost the small war in his jaw, and I understood that the proud king had just discovered he did not want me to leave the room, and was furious about the discovery. So I told the truth, the way I do, because it was the only currency I had left, and I was done spending it carefully. "You think you cannot be surprised," I said. "That is the whole of you, my lord. Everyone in this fortress knows it. You have made certain they know it. The king who is never caught off guard. The man who sees it coming. It is your armour, and it is very good armour." I set the linen down on the edge of his map, which was an outrage, and I did not care. But a thing everyone knows about you is a thing your enemies know about you. Someone has looked at your armour and found the seam. They are not planning to get past a man who cannot be surprised. They are planning to use the fact that you cannot believe you might be. The fire moved in the grate. He had gone very still, the particular stillness of a man holding a door shut against something. "You are a maid," he said. You light lamps. I do. I light every lamp in this fortress, and I snuff every one, and I have been doing it in the dark behind your walls since before you knew my face, which means I have heard 6 years of things men say when they think only the furniture is listening. I met his eyes, which a maid does not do. I am the last person in your kingdom who would lie to you, my lord, because I am the only one who gains nothing by it. I have already lost. They have my warning, and they have laughed at it. The only thing I have left to give you is the truth. And you will not take it, and I cannot make you, and I find that my voice did the thing I had not given it permission to do. I stopped it. I find I cannot watch it. That is all. He stood. He came around the table, and the wolf let him, and he stopped a full pace from me, a careful man. A guarded distance. A king who held the space between us like something he did not trust himself to close. He looked down at me for a long moment. When I was 19, he said, slowly, as though the words were being drawn out of a place that had grown over. A man I trusted told me there was no danger on the Eastern Road. I believed him, because I was certain of him, the way you are certain of the people you love. My father took that road. He stopped. His hand had risen, halfway, as if to offer something, and then it fell, and did not. I have spent every year since making certain I would never again be the fool who did not see it coming. I built a man no one could surprise. Something terrible moved behind his face. And you have just told me that the man I built is the door they intend to walk through. Yes, I said. Quiet, I have. For one moment, I thought he would believe me. I saw it cross him, the willingness, the crack. I have replayed that moment more than any other, because if he had taken my hand then, in that room, it would all have gone differently and easier, and I would have a whole shoulder. He did not take my hand. He closed the door instead, not the real one, the one in his face, the one I did not have the key to. Pride is a fortress too, and his had stood 20 years, and a maid does not breach in an afternoon what grief built in a lifetime. The household is secure, he said again. To me, this time. Softer, which was worse. I picked up my linen. The wolf rose to follow me, and he did not call it back, and we left the King of the Iron Reach alone with his map, and his certainty, and the seam I had shown him, and he would not look at. That was the closest he came to seeing me, before the dark. A pace away, his hand half risen, the truth on the table beside his border. I want it remembered, because of what he became after, that he had the chance to be it sooner, in the light, and could not. The dark made him brave. I have decided to forgive the dark for that, since it gave me the rest of him. They took my keys the next morning. Roderick ordered it for my own protection, the order said, so that I would not wander where I should not, and frighten myself with shadows. A maid without keys is a maid without work, and a maid without work is a maid one short step from the gate. I understood the message. I had become inconvenient, and inconvenient things in a fortress get moved to the edge, and then out of it. I did not go quietly, but I went. There is a difference between a woman who accepts a thing and a woman who is biding. I was biding. I gave up the ring of iron that had sung at my hip for 6 years, and I felt naked without it, and I started, that very afternoon, to make myself a problem in the only way left to a maid stripped of her keys. I started watching Roderick. It is a strange power. Being no one, stripped of my keys, I was less than furniture. And less than furniture is invisible in a way even maids are not. I followed the master of the household through his ordinary day, 3 paces behind a serving cart that was not mine, and I learned the thing that should have been obvious from the first night. The thing that had been standing in the calm centre of every dismissal. He was there, every time. When Gunnar laughed at me, Roderick had been within earshot, examining a ledger. When the kitchen steward told me to mind my pots, Roderick had been in the doorway, waiting on the king's supper. Every single time a man had told me I was mistaken, the master of the household had been close enough to hear it land. Close enough to make sure it landed. He had not been investigating my warning. He had been conducting the disbelief, the way a man conducts a choir, standing where he could hear every voice and correct any that went off the note. If you have ever known a thing in your body before your mind could prove it, known it the way you know a stair is there in the dark, then you know how I felt. 3 paces behind that cart, with no keys, and no rank, and no one who would believe the maid who had been wrong about everything except the one thing that mattered. Stay with me. We are nearly to the dark part, and the dark part is where a maid finally gets to be the only one who can see. If a slow-burning story about being right when no one believes you is the kind of thing you stay up for, you might subscribe before the lights go out they are about to. Now, back to it. The wolf found me that night. I was in the disused West Tower where they had quartered me, keyless, useless, and it came up the stairs and put its great head in my lap and would not leave, and I understood that the king's wolf had decided to spend the night guarding a maid instead of the king, which meant the king was unguarded by the one creature in the fortress that could not be lied to. I should explain what I had finally pieced together, because I had pieced it together by then, sitting in a cold tower with a wolf's head in my lap. The name I had heard in the passage, the name I had carried to 6 men Vaughan, a loud rival lord who had been sniffing around the king's borders for a season. That name was a gift. Vaughan was the obvious one. Vaughan was meant to be heard. A maid who accused Lord Vaughan could be dismissed as a maid who had heard tavern gossip and gotten above herself. Roderick had let me run at Vaughan like a hound at a dragged scent. Because every hour I spent being wrong about Vaughan was an hour no one spent being right about Roderick. The plot was not Vaughan's. The plot belonged to the calm man at the king's right hand, the only man with keys to every door, including the ones I had been forbidden, and the feast was tonight. I did not have my keys, but I had carried them for 6 years, and I will tell you a secret about keys. The woman who holds them stops needing them. I knew which doors stuck. I knew which servants' passages ran behind which walls. I knew the fortress in the dark, the way Roderick knew it in the light. And I knew one thing he had forgotten. Because powerful men forget the people who clean up after them, I knew that every torch and lamp and candle in the great hall was lit and snuffed by maids, on a signal from the passages behind the walls. Which meant if you wanted the hall dark at a chosen moment, you did not need sorcery. You needed the maids. You needed someone who could give the maids the signal. You needed the master of the household. I went down through the walls. The feast was loud above me, the whole pack at the long tables, the king at the head with Roderick at his right and Gunnar at his shoulder, and not one of them looking for a maid in the dark behind the stone. I moved through the servants' passages I had cleaned 10,000 times, and I found the lamp boy at his post by the signal cord, a child of 9 who knew me, and I crouched in the dark and I asked him, quiet, who had told him tonight's signal. The master himself, the boy said. Strange, he said. The master never comes down here. I told the boy to run. I told him to find Gunnar and say the words wolf and dark and Tilda was right, and to keep saying them until someone's hand closed on a sword. He was a good boy. He ran. And then, above me, the signal came not from the boy's cord which I was holding, but from a second cord I had not known about, because Roderick had set his own, because of course he had. The man left nothing to a maid he could do himself. The lights went out. I have tried many times to describe what a great hall sounds like when the light dies and 300 wolves cannot see. It is not screaming, not at first. It is a held breath, 300 strong, and then the scrape of benches, and then the first blade, and under all of it a single voice Roderick's, Calm, even now. Calm, always saying the king's name like an apology. I came up out of the wall into the black, behind the wolf throne, and I did the only thing 6 years and no keys had left me able to do. I found the king in the dark. I found him by the cold spot in the hall that was him. By the place the air went still the way it does around a man who has just understood that his oldest friend is moving toward him with a knife. I got my hand around his wrist. I will not tell you I was brave. I was past brave. I was only sure, and I pulled. Hard, a maid hauling a king sideways off his own throne. And the blade that had been meant for his heart went into my shoulder instead. I felt it the way you feel cold water, all wrongness and no pain yet, and then all pain. I did not let go of his wrist. I had hauled heavier things through these passages. I hauled him. Door, I said, into the dark, into his ear, the only word that mattered. Behind the throne. Trust the maid or die, my king, choose now. He chose. I have thought about that, since that a man whose entire life was built on never being unguarded, never being led, never trusting a thing he had not verified twice, chose in the black to be led by the hand by a bleeding maid he had dismissed in front of his whole court. He chose me in the one moment he could not see me, which is the only moment that has ever counted to me. I took him through the wall. I knew every turn. He did not. I bled down the back of my own arm and counted the passages by the feel of the stone and got us to the lower stair, and behind us I heard Roderick's men finding the empty throne and the smear of my blood and not understanding. Because they were warriors, and they were thinking like warriors, and the one thing a warrior cannot track is a maid who has walked away through a wall that isn't supposed to be a door. We came out into torchlight in the lower yard, into Gunnar and a dozen swords, and the lamp boy white as milk. And Gunnar took one look at the king alive, and the maid bleeding, and his face did a thing I will carry to my grave. Because it was the face of a man understanding, all at once, every single time he had laughed. The king held me up. I was past holding myself up by then, and he turned to Gunnar with his arm around a maid, and her blood on his royal hand, and his voice not calm at all, for once in his armoured life not calm. "The hall," he said. "Roderick, now, and someone get this woman a healer before I lose the only person in my kingdom who saw." It was not clean after that, the way these things are never clean. They took Roderick in the dark hall, and he did not fight, because his weapon had never been a sword, it had been everyone's trust, and that was spent. By the law of the pack, he could have demanded a challenge. He did not. He demanded, instead, to speak, and the king let him, which I did not understand until I heard what he said. "You never listened to her," Roderick told the hall, almost gentle, the last cruelty of a cruel and gentle man. "Not one of you. I only had to stand beside you while you didn't." He looked at the king then, his oldest friend, and there was something in it that was almost grief. "You taught them all that you could not be surprised. I just used the lesson. That was the thing that broke the king's face. Finally, not the knife. Not the betrayal. That, the master of the household had built the whole murder out of the king's own pride, brick by brick, and called it a lesson, and he was right, and everyone heard him be right. Magnus stripped him of name and household, and put him past the eastern border, which is the law's coldest mercy. Vaughan, who had been nothing but a dragged scent the whole time, was sent home with apologies he did not deserve, and will dine on for years. The fortress did not heal quickly. A household that has learned its own trust was a weapon does not simply pick up its baskets and carry on. There were quiet weeks. There were a great many maids who suddenly found that men turned, now, at the sound of keys. My shoulder healed slowly and badly, and aches when the rain comes, and I have decided to keep the ache, the way I keep everything, as a record. Here is the part I said I would tell you. The first time the king truly looked at me. It was 3 days after, in the healer's quarters, where I had been told to stay and had mostly ignored the telling. He came alone, which a king does not do, and he stood in the doorway. He is a tall man, and the door was small, and the wolf was already inside, asleep across my feet like it owned them, which it did, and he looked at me as though he had never seen me before in his life. Because he had not. He had seen a maid making a scene. He had seen furniture that walked. Now he saw the woman who had hauled him through a wall in the dark with a knife in her shoulder, because she was sure. And he did not have a single word ready, the famously controlled king of the Iron Reach. Not one. And I watched him not have it. "You told them 7 times, he said at last. 8, counting you. I am aware of which one I was." His jaw moved. "I dismissed you in front of my court. I let him take your keys. I would be dead, and so would half that hall, if you had been the woman I treated you as." He stopped, started again, and this is the only soft thing I will give you, because it is the only one that matters. My wolf knew you for a month. He brought you my glove, my seal, my own hand if he could have managed it, and I told myself it was an animal making an animal's mistake. Because the alternative was that the unguarded thing in me had already chosen, and I had not been asked. He looked at the wolf, asleep on my feet. "I am the most well-defended man alive, and I have been outmaneuvered by my own heart and a scullery maid, and I find I do not mind losing for the first time in my life." I told him he was not as armoured as he thought he was. He said he was beginning to understand that, and then he closed the small distance there was to close, and he kissed me once, careful of the shoulder, and I understood in that single moment that being seen, truly seen, by someone who had every reason not to bother is a thing worth getting stabbed for, though I would recommend against the stabbing if there is any other way. There usually is, there just wasn't for me. 6 months on now, and the rain still finds my shoulder, and I still hear keys differently than other people do. I am Luna of the Iron Reach, which is a sentence I write down sometimes just to look at it. The court has stopped flinching when the wolf follows me, because the wolf follows me everywhere, and the court has more sense now than to argue with what the wolf decided before any of them could see it. Gunnar guards the king's door himself, and turns, every time, at the sound of me coming, and once called me Luna to a junior warrior in a tone that dared the boy to laugh. The boy did not laugh. No one laughs anymore. It is not fear. It is that they finally heard the keys. Magnus is a proud man. Still, you do not unbuild a fortress in a season, but he is a proud man who now asks the maids what they have heard, which has saved his border twice already. Because maids hear everything, and always have, and the only thing that ever changed is that someone finally turned around. He gave me a key. Last month, on a plain morning, with no ceremony, the way the realest things are given. Not a ring of them won. Iron, old, worn smooth. The key to the one room in the fortress that no maid has ever held the key to. The room behind the wolf throne. The dark passage I hauled him through, sealed now, kept, ours. He put it in my healed and aching hand and folded my fingers over it and did not explain. Because he did not need to. I know what a key means better than anyone alive. It means someone, finally, has opened the door. So tell me, did you believe her? Did you believe me? When no one in that hall would, or did you wait for the lights to go out like the rest of them? Come down to the comments and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read them all now. Every one, because I spent 6 years being no one, and I have developed strong opinions about being heard. If a story about a woman who was right all along is the kind you stay for, subscribe and stay close. There is always another door here, and always someone who knows where the dark passages run. Until the next one. Mind the lamps.